The soft, enveloping music filled the air of the charity gala as I watched the twinkling lights reflect off the crystal glasses. The hall was packed with well-dressed people, most of them laughing and exchanging exuberant greetings as if each conversation were a carefully choreographed social dance. But while everyone around me seemed absorbed in the festivity, I felt like a solitary spectator, wrapped in a fog of boredom that I couldn't shake off. The opulence of that night, with its tables adorned with lush flowers and exquisite dishes, felt like a staging, a theatrical performance that I had rehearsed so well that the show no longer excited me. I leaned back in my chair, observing my reflection on the polished surface of the table. It was easy to lose myself in the image I projected, a successful millionaire, clad in a tailored suit with a rehearsed smile. But behind that facade was a man who, inside, felt empty, consumed by the fatigue of a life filled with excess and superficialities. What once was a source of pride and joy had now become a burden. The sparkle of diamonds and the aroma of champagne couldn't fill the void that stretched across my chest. As my business friends discussed investment strategies and new acquisitions, I found it impossible to care. The conversations were a distant echo, a murmur blending with the sound of the orchestra. Disconnected thoughts swirled in my mind, each heavier than the last. I had achieved everything I dreamed of: money, power, respect. But at what cost? The life I led seemed a labyrinth of illusions, where the true essence of happiness slipped through my fingers. I longed for something more, something that would give meaning to my existence. As I gazed out the window, the city sparkled like a constellation of lights, yet its beauty left me untouched. I wondered if there were people in those bustling streets who cared about issues I couldn't comprehend. What did it truly mean to live? What was the daily struggle, the effort to put food on the table, the love and solidarity in difficult times? These questions began to haunt me, like shadows that I couldn't shake off. After the gala, in the privacy of my car, I still felt the weight of the indifference I had witnessed. A friend sitting next to me noticed my expression and, without me saying a word, asked what was bothering me. He was one of the few who knew the depth of my unrest. After some hesitation, I decided to open my heart. I spoke about the fatigue consuming me, the need to reconnect with humanity, to understand life beyond the bubble of wealth I had built. With a thoughtful look, he suggested I take a test. The idea was simple yet bold: pretend to be an ordinary man, a worker seeking a job, to experience the daily lives of those less fortunate than me. The proposal seemed insane, but at the same time, a spark of curiosity ignited within me. I imagined what it would be like to live without the shackles of my status, without the responsibilities that wealth brought. Perhaps I could find a new purpose, a new perspective on what it means to be human. The plan began to take shape in my mind. I could dive into a world that had been accessible to me only through reports and news. I could learn the stories of people who fight every day, who face hardships with courage and resilience. With this idea taking root, a growing determination seized me. I wanted to become part of something larger than myself, something that would make me feel alive again. After several weeks of preparation, I decided it was time to put my plan into action. I temporarily moved to a humble neighborhood, an area where life pulsed to a different rhythm, far from the glamour and ostentation I knew. In my new home, the sounds were different, the voices of children playing in the streets, the aroma of home-cooked meals wafting from neighboring kitchens, all enveloped me like a warm embrace. I bid farewell to my former life, leaving behind the image of a millionaire to present myself as an ordinary worker in search of opportunities. As I explored the streets, a bakery caught my attention. The smell of fresh bread and pastries wafting through the air drew me in. The bakery was small but full of life, with a team working in harmony, each contributing to create something special. It was there that I met Clara, a young woman who seemed to embody the essence of what I was seeking. She stood behind the counter, smiling at customers, exuding a contagious energy that lit up the room. Clara was a force of nature, and watching her work made me realize the passion she had for what she did. She was a simple woman, but there was a spark in her eyes that indicated there was more to her life than just daily challenges. The small moments she shared with customers, the way she spoke with affection about the bakery's products, revealed the beauty of human interactions that I had neglected for so long. As I helped out at the bakery, learning to handle dough and serve customers, I felt myself slowly integrating into that new world. Conversations with Clara became more frequent, and I admired her as she shared her dreams and aspirations. I listened intently, absorbing every word. It was a completely different universe from what I knew, where victories were small but significant, and where daily struggles shaped the character of those around me. Life in the bakery offered me a perspective I had never imagined. It was a simple cycle, yet brimming with meaning, hard work, dedication, love for family and community. With each passing day, I felt more connected to that place, and Clara, with her gentle demeanor, became a central figure in my new reality. I knew I was only at the beginning of a journey that could change not just how I viewed the world but also how I viewed myself. Life in Clara's home unfolded at a rhythm I had never experienced before. The warmth of the home, the smell of homemade food, and the laughter echoing through the walls were like an unfamiliar melody, yet surprisingly sweet. Each shared dinner was a new discovery, a window into a reality I had overlooked for far too long. Sitting at the table, I observed the dynamics between Clara and her family, a tangle of love and challenges woven together in an incredibly intimate way. The conversations at the table were filled with stories and laughter, struggles and victories. It was fascinating to see how each person contributed to the conversation, as if every word were an ingredient in the recipe of their lives. Clara, with her light-heartedness and contagious smile, seemed to be the pulsating heart of that table. She spoke about her experiences at the bakery, the joy of seeing customers smile as they received a warm loaf of bread, and the happiness of helping her father fix things around the house, small tasks that, to me, felt like mere obligations. But for her, they were moments of connection, opportunities to be present, and to make a difference. The food, simple and homemade, was a sacred ritual. At first, I hesitated to serve myself, conscious that I didn't deserve that modest feast, but Clara encouraged me to join in. The pasta, made with fresh tomatoes grown in the backyard, was a dish she prepared with such care that I could feel the love emanating from every bite. It was unlike the gourmet food I was used to, where presentation often overshadowed flavor. Here, simplicity was the beauty, and that touched me in a way I couldn't explain. As I sat at the table, I discovered that it wasn't just the food that nourished that moment, but the presence of each family member. Conversations flowed naturally, and I found myself immersed in their lives. There was something incredibly powerful in the way they supported each other, a strength I had lost sight of in my own life. The financial struggles were palpable, but their resilience was even more evident. They laughed at the little things and faced challenges with a courage I admired. It was a life of struggle, but also of love, and I longed to absorb a bit of that light. As the days passed, my friendship with Clara deepened. Our conversations became more intimate and meaningful, and I felt a connection that went beyond physical attraction. She shared her dreams, aspirations, and worries with me. Meanwhile, I listened and learned, absorbing each word with a growing desire to be part of that simple, real life. But there was a weight in my heart, a shadow that followed me, the truth about my identity. How could I open my heart to her, knowing I was living a lie? That doubt consumed me, and with each shared laugh, with every glance we exchanged, the guilt grew. One night, as we watched the stars through the living room window, a sense of peace enveloped me. Clara spoke about how dreams guided her, how she believed every small step brought her closer to something greater. I listened intently, admiring the passion that radiated from her words. In contrast, my own life felt so empty, so superficial. What I had achieved seemed insignificant compared to the depth of Clara's life and her family's. I wanted to be honest with her, but the fear of losing that precious bond paralyzed me. In that moment, I realized that Clara had become much more than just a friend, she was a transformative force in my life. The way she viewed the world, with hope and determination, was something I had never encountered in my bubble of wealth. Her life was a mosaic of small victories and challenges faced with bravery, and I yearned to be part of it. But the lie I was feeding became an increasingly heavy burden. The days passed in a whirlwind of emotions. I witnessed Clara's family's continuous struggle to keep up with bills, how they took turns paying essential expenses, and how every small expenditure was carefully planned. It was a reality I had never known, and it made me rethink everything I knew about money and happiness. They found joy in the little things: family game nights, a song sung together with a guitar, and dinners where love was the main ingredient. As I sank deeper into that reality, my connection with Clara grew stronger. The way she looked into my eyes, how her laughter lit up the room, and how her affection enveloped me made me want to be a better man. I wanted to be worthy of her friendship, of her trust, but the truth consumed me. How could I be a partner to someone so special while hiding who I really was? The uncertainty followed me with every step. Our conversations became deeper, the glances more intense, and I found myself wishing that moment would never end. Yet, at the same time, the need to be honest became increasingly urgent. I was in love with Clara, more than I could have ever imagined, and the weight of the lie suffocated me. What could I do to reconcile the love I felt with the truth that tormented me? The nights grew long, and the hours echoed with doubts. I wanted to tell her the truth, but the fear of losing everything I had built kept me silent. Thus, I found myself trapped in an emotional labyrinth, where every path I tried to take led to a new uncertainty. The love I felt for Clara blossomed, but the insecurity about my identity and the consequences of my lie became a burden that grew harder to bear. What I truly desired was to be part of that life, but the line between truth and lies was becoming increasingly thin. It was a sunny afternoon, and the smell of dinner wafted through Clara's house. I was more nervous than ever since I began this experience. The invitation to the event at their home had come unexpectedly, a gesture of welcome that moved me. Clara and her family were organizing a small celebration in honor of a family friend's birthday, and I had the honor of being included. The idea of being in her house, surrounded by people I didn't know, made me anxious, but there was something deeper in my heart, a desire to truly connect with them. As soon as I arrived, Clara greeted me with a radiant smile. Her loose hair danced in the wind, and her cheeks were slightly flushed with excitement. The house was simple but full of life and warmth. The walls were adorned with family photos and mementos that told stories I had yet to learn. The sunlight filtered through the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere that contrasted with the opulent banquets I was used to. Clara's parents, upon welcoming me, showed a hospitality that deeply touched me. Her mother, a woman with bright eyes and an easy smile, hurried to offer me a glass of fresh juice. Her father, a man of strong presence and firm voice, greeted me with a warm handshake and a look that conveyed confidence. I was surprised by how easily they welcomed me, as if I were part of the family. In those moments, I felt a mix of emotion and apprehension. It was a world so different from my own, where money and status often define relationships. Here, everything was about genuine connection and affection. As the event unfolded, I helped Clara and her family with the preparations. I chopped vegetables, assembled salads, and set the table with the same dedication an artist puts into their work. The joy in the air was palpable, laughter echoed as everyone worked together. This unity around food was something I had never experienced so intensely. I remembered how many times, in my old life, meals were just a matter of convenience, a space for business and superficial conversations. Here, each dish served seemed to carry a story, a tradition, and I was learning to value that. The act of preparing food turned into a ritual, and I found myself immersed not just in the task but also in the vibrant energy of the family. Clara taught me to make a special sauce, and as we mixed the ingredients, she spoke about how the recipe had been passed down through generations. I watched her, admiring her skill and the ease with which she moved around the kitchen. There was a spark in her eyes that made me feel like I was discovering a new dimension of life. When we finally sat down at the table, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and animated conversations. The food was simple but delicious, and I realized that each bite was full of love. That table, laden with homemade dishes and beloved people, made me reflect on everything I had left behind, on the superficial life I had led. The human warmth emanating from each person, there was something I had neglected for too long. After dinner, Clara and I stepped away from the group for a bit. The night was clear, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. We talked about dreams and aspirations. I listened intently, each word she spoke echoing in my heart. Clara talked about her desire to study architecture, to build homes for those without shelter, to make a difference in the world in her own way. The passion in her voice was contagious, and I found myself admiring not just the woman before me, but the strength and determination she possessed. As I listened to her dreams, a wave of questions began to arise within me. What had I really achieved so far? What did success mean to me? I had a fortune, but what did that mean if there was no purpose behind it? The life I led, filled with luxuries and excesses, seemed so empty compared to the simplicity and depth of Clara's life and her family's. As Clara spoke about her hopes, a part of me felt a growing pain. How could I tell her the truth about who I really was? The thought of losing the connection I had created with her became unbearable. I didn't want to be the millionaire who merely enjoyed a life of lies. I wanted to be the man who was learning to cherish every little moment, every shared smile, every simple meal that became a celebration. The event was drawing to a close, and the energy in the air was one of satisfaction and joy. People were saying their goodbyes, and I felt increasingly at ease there. Clara gave me a look that made my heart race. It was a look full of hope, understanding, and a connection I had never imagined could exist. That moment, under the stars, made me realize that I had found something precious. More than a friendship, more than a romance, I had found a purpose, a reason to be more than what I was. That night, I returned home with a light heart, but my mind was heavy with thoughts. I lay down, but sleep felt distant. Clara's words echoed in my mind, and I knew I had to make a decision. It was clear that my life had changed in a way I could never have predicted. And now, more than ever, I found myself in a dilemma, to tell the truth and risk losing everything, or to keep this secret and continue living this life of lies. The moonlight illuminated my room, and I wondered if I could open my heart to Clara. That love that was growing between us deserved to be built on honesty, not illusions. I didn't know how she would react, but one thing I knew, the truth always has a way of revealing itself. And I was ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. Sitting at the small kitchen table in Clara's home, I observed every detail around me. The walls, adorned with photos of family moments, seemed to tell stories I didn't know. The smell of the pasta Clara was cooking filled the air, creating such a cozy atmosphere that made my heart race. But despite the comfort I felt, a shadow of anxiety lingered over me. The idea of opening my heart to Clara, of telling the truth about who I really was, felt increasingly daunting. I remembered how it all began, my desire to understand life beyond the walls of my opulent world. The time I spent with Clara and her family taught me so much, but it also complicated my perception. The connection I felt for her was not just friendship, it was something deeper, something I had never experienced before. The way she smiled, how she cared for each of her family members, stirred feelings of love within me that I didn't know existed. And as those feelings grew, the idea of lying to her became more and more unbearable. Clara was preparing for dinner, her nimble hands mixing ingredients with a skill I admired. Looking at her, I realized that my hesitation to tell the truth was not only based on the fear of losing the connection we had. It was also an internal struggle about what I truly wanted. I wanted to be worthy of her love, but could she love someone like me, who had lived in a world so distant from hers? The table was set, and soon Clara's family gathered around. The dinner was simple, but the energy emanating from that room was palpable. The laughter, the shared stories, each little moment was a reminder that true wealth was not in material possessions but in unity and love. I felt like an intruder in that world, but at the same time, I was feeling more at home than I ever had. When Clara looked at me, her eyes shining with a special light, my heart raced. It was a look that seemed to understand, that knew of my internal struggle, even though I hadn't said a word. After dinner, Clara and I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Walking side by side, each step felt heavier than the last. I wanted to tell the truth, but the words refused to come out. The sky was clear, and the stars shone with an intensity that seemed to reflect the confusion within me. Each constellation was a reminder that I was lost, even surrounded by such beauty and simplicity. Around me, the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, laughter in the distance, felt so far removed from the life I knew. I was there, but at the same time, I wasn't. When I returned to Clara's house, something had changed. A heavy atmosphere hung in the air, and I realized there was something more weighing down her family. The worry was evident on Clara's face, and it left me feeling uneasy. I wanted to ask, but I had already sensed that her life was marked by challenges she often didn't share. But that night, I couldn't ignore the growing feeling that they were facing something bigger than I could imagine. In the following days, the tension increased. Clara seemed more distant, and I felt my presence was becoming a burden for her. Life went on, but I noticed the smiles were becoming less frequent. One morning, while Clara was getting ready to leave, I followed her to the door. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, as if she were battling an internal storm. In that moment, I realized I needed to understand what was happening. When I asked about the situation, Clara hesitated before opening her heart. She began to talk about the financial difficulties her family was facing. The fear of losing their home, the uncertainty about the future, all of this unfolded before me like a raw and painful reality. Each word she spoke felt like a blow to my heart, and I felt paralyzed. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see the pressure she and her family were under? As Clara spoke, I felt the guilt rising within me. I was living a lie while her life was a constant struggle. The tears in her eyes hit me deeply, and I felt small. The truth I feared to tell now seemed insignificant in light of the pain she was enduring. I wanted to scream, to offer help, but how could I do so without revealing my true identity? With every word she said, the weight of my lie grew more unbearable. After our conversation, Clara stepped away, and I realized I needed to take action. Anger and frustration mixed in my chest, and the thought of remaining in the shadows became intolerable. Her family deserved support, and I had the resources to provide it. But how? The thought of revealing who I really was terrified me, but something inside me decided it was time to act. In the days that followed, I made it my mission to investigate the situation. I needed to understand what was at stake. I visited the local bank and asked about how loans and assistance options worked. Each conversation left me more determined to help, but I was still lost about how to do so without exposing my true identity. I felt that each step I took was an attempt to balance two worlds that, until then, I hadn't been able to unite. Deep down, I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just show up with a check or a plan. That would ruin the trust Clara and her family had placed in me. My goal was to find a way to help without them knowing who I really was. The moral dilemma consumed me, but I was determined to do something about it. As time passed, my meetings with Clara became more frequent. I watched her struggle to maintain optimism even when reality seemed bleak. Her strength was admirable, but it was also painful to witness. I wanted to shout that I was there to help her, that I had the power to change everything, but uncertainty kept me silent. One night, while we were walking, Clara mentioned a family friend who had gone through a similar situation and managed to recover. The conversation sparked a flame in me. If he could do it, maybe I could also find a way to help effectively. The idea of creating a plan that not only alleviated the pressure on her family but also empowered them to rebuild began to take shape in my mind. As I walked beside Clara, I knew time was running out. Her family's situation was critical, and the thought of losing their home left me anxious. But at the same time, I was battling my own demons. How could I be honest with her while still entangled in a web of lies? The truth was there, pulsing, but I didn't know how to release it without causing pain. Nights passed, and the pressure in my chest only grew. The love I felt for Clara became stronger, and the idea of losing her terrified me. But the guilt of not being honest, of not doing what was right, also consumed me. I was at a crossroads, and every path I saw seemed more complicated than the last. What I needed was courage, but the internal struggle I faced wouldn't go away. And so, while life around me continued, I was trapped in a cycle of uncertainty and fear, not knowing which direction to take. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink as I walked through the streets of the neighborhood where Clara and her family lived. The fresh air of the afternoon carried the unmistakable aroma of freshly baked bread coming from the bakery, a place that had become a second home for me in recent days. I had gotten involved in small jobs, trying to help her family without revealing my true identity. The idea that I could make a difference in their lives, even discreetly, filled my heart with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. My plan was starting to take shape. I had saved a little of what I earned from the small tasks I did, and on a whim, I offered to help at the bakery. Clara's smile when she saw me there, getting my hands into the dough and helping to make bread and pastries, was like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. Every moment we spent together, every laugh shared, and every glance exchanged intensified my dilemma. I was in love with her, but the lie I carried was becoming an increasingly heavy burden. I looked around as I worked. The bakery was a simple place, but full of charm. The wooden shelves displayed a variety of breads and cakes, each one more delicious than the last. Clara moved gracefully between the tables, organizing the products and serving customers with a genuine smile. She seemed so happy, so fulfilled in her simplicity. Sometimes, I wondered if she knew how special she was. The way she dedicated herself to her family and community was something I deeply admired. The nights were the hardest. When Clara's house lit up with the soft glow of the lamps, I would sit in the backyard, gazing at the stars. The conversations we shared under that starry sky were like a balm for my soul. Clara would talk about her dreams, her aspirations, and the fears that haunted her. She had a dreamy spirit, and I listened intently, absorbing each word as if it were a precious gem. One night, as the gentle wind caressed our faces, Clara began to speak about her hopes for the future. She mentioned the importance of having a stable home, a place where she could raise a family, away from the financial uncertainties that plagued her. Her words pierced my heart, for I knew that behind the smile she wore, there was a constant struggle. I wanted to scream that I had the solution, that I could help her. But the truth I hid was an insurmountable obstacle. As I listened to her, a whirlwind of emotions formed inside me. The love I felt for Clara mingled with guilt and fear. I was living a lie, and with each passing day, that lie became more difficult to bear. The connection we had built was genuine, but there was an invisible barrier between us, and I knew that sooner or later, she would discover the truth. The weight of that revelation made me feel as if I were suffocating. One day, returning home after a shift at the bakery, I found Clara on her porch, looking toward the horizon. The sun had set, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the night sky. The scene was so soothing that I approached, sitting beside her. The silence that settled between us was comfortable, yet there was a palpable tension in the air. I knew I needed to be honest, but the fear of what that could cause paralyzed me. Clara turned to me, her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and insecurity. I wanted to tell her that I was willing to do anything to help her and her family, but the truth was that I didn't know how. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but the fear of losing her stood between me and the honesty I desperately needed. I remembered all the times I had watched her strive to maintain positivity, even when the challenges seemed immense. She was a warrior, and I, a coward. As the night wore on, the conversation flowed with a torrent of thoughts and feelings. Clara spoke of her frustrations and shattered hopes, and I felt smaller and smaller. How could I present myself as a savior when, in reality, I was what I feared the most? The fragility of her situation hit me like a wave, and I realized I could no longer postpone the truth. It was time to confront what I had feared for so long. As the sky darkened, I knew the moment was approaching. The sparkle of the stars seemed to reflect the light of my decision, and my heart raced. I looked into Clara's eyes, searching for the courage I so desperately needed. The love I felt for her was stronger than any fear, and I was determined not to let my lie destroy what we had built. The truth was about to be set free, but the uncertainty of what that would mean for both of us loomed in the air like a storm about to break. I felt the night growing heavier, but at the same time, there was a lightness in the idea that, finally, I wouldn't have to carry this secret anymore. Clara deserved the truth, and I needed to be worthy of the love she offered me. The weight of the lie was crushing me, and as I looked at Clara, I knew it was time to free myself. As the wind gently blew around us, I took a deep breath, feeling every fiber of my being prepare for what was to come. The love I felt for Clara was the only thing giving me hope, and at the same time, it terrified me. I was ready to face the consequences of my choice, and from that moment on, my life would never be the same. The sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, while I sat on Clara's porch, the soft breeze brushing against my face. My heart was in turmoil. The time had come to reveal the truth I had hidden for so long, the truth that risked shattering everything I had built with Clara. I felt a knot in my throat at the thought of the expression on her face when she discovered that the man she knew was not just an ordinary worker, but a millionaire who disguised himself to understand the life she led. Clara's house was modest yet full of life and warmth. The aroma of dinner being prepared by her mother filled the air, and the laughter of her siblings echoed throughout the space. It was a home, something I had never experienced in my life, full of superficialities. I didn't want to lose this. But the lie was becoming unbearable. Clara deserved the truth, no matter how painful it might be. When Clara joined me on the porch, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and expectation, my heart raced. I knew that from this moment on, nothing would be the same. The sky gradually darkened, and I felt the darkness closing in on our relationship as well. The words began to flow, but I hesitated, fear paralyzing me. What could I say that would make this revelation less devastating? I took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage to expose my true identity. Finally, the words escaped my mouth as if they were trying to flee at all costs. I told her that I was not who she thought I was. I spoke about my life of excess, how I had felt empty even surrounded by wealth. I explained that I had chosen to disguise myself to understand the lives of people who truly struggle, who face daily challenges, and that I had never known a life so rich in simplicity and love as hers. The expression on her face changed, and I saw confusion transform into pain. The silence that followed was deafening. The world around us seemed to disappear, and I was there, naked in my vulnerability, hoping she could understand. But the wound had been inflicted. Clara felt betrayed, and I couldn't blame her for that. I had thrown away the trust she placed in me, I had deceived her, and the pain I saw in her eyes was a reflection of my own despair. But then, amid the confusion and pain, something inside me began to stir. It was my desire to show Clara that my love for her was genuine, that I truly cared about her well-being and that of her family. I began to talk about my plan, a plan I had created in secret, one that would not only help save her home but also promote stability and growth within the community. With every word I spoke, I realized that there was still a chance to turn the situation around. Clara needed to understand that my intentions were pure, that I didn't just want to be the savior, but a partner in this journey. I spoke about a fund I intended to create, a fund aimed at supporting local small businesses, helping those who were struggling to make their ventures thrive. I wanted the community to have a future, to empower people to dream and achieve, just as Clara dreamed of a better future. I watched her closely as I spoke, searching for any sign that she was listening, that there was a spark of hope in her heart. The tension in the air was palpable. Clara looked at me, her expressions shifting between anger and confusion, but a flicker of curiosity also began to emerge. I knew the path to redemption wouldn't be easy. The words I had carefully chosen needed to touch her heart, and I had to show her that I had learned from this experience, that I was no longer the man who had entered her life with a lie, but someone who understood the importance of honesty, humility, and true love. As I spoke, I started to realize that Clara was not just a young fighter from a humble family, she was a force of nature. Her resilience, her passion, and her love for her family were contagious. I found myself admiring her even more, recognizing that even amid pain, there was something special in her essence. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be someone who could contribute, who could help her reach her dreams. As the night wore on, the tension began to transform into something softer. I saw Clara processing the information, her emotions slowly shifting. The silence that had once been heavy was now filled with a quiet anticipation. I knew there was still a long way to go, but there was hope. Her gaze, which had once reflected betrayal, now seemed to seek understanding. The love I felt for her was so profound that I couldn't give up. Finally, Clara spoke. Not with words, but with her eyes and the way her expression softened. The pain was still there, but there was something more, a desire to understand, a willingness to believe that someone's intentions could be genuine. Her heart, like mine, was in a process of healing. And in that moment, I realized that I also needed to be honest with myself. From there, we began to chart a new path. Touched by the sincerity of my proposal, Clara started to consider the idea of joining forces. Together, we could not only save her home but transform the community into a place where people could thrive. I saw her begin to open her heart, starting to realize that despite the initial betrayal, there was a way forward that we could walk together. As we talked about the future, the night grew ever more starry, and the connection between us deepened. I was no longer just a wealthy man in disguise, I was a man who had found purpose, true love, and a reason to fight alongside Clara. And so, in that moment of vulnerability and hope, we began to shape a new destiny, not just for ourselves, but for all those in need of support and love.